Good morning, everybody. And good morning to those who are watching online around the country and around the world. Thank you for being part of this amazing Crossroads family. I'm going to give a kudos to Lee. And he's at the hospital this week. And also you have Jennifer, who usually plays keyboards, she's at the hospital with her dad right now. So if we can keep her in prayer. But isn't it wonderful to have people that can just come in, like our music person, to come in and play like that? I can't wait in 2 weeks to do the meal preparations. One of the favorite things that we do. Sylvia and I are signed up for that. 500,000 meals that we'll be preparing. I think that's absolutely wonderful. Let me ask you this question. What's the best financial advice you ever got from a person before? And did you take it? I can think of what mine was. Mine was when my dad, I was a paper boy, and he said this. He said, son, always give the first 10% of what you make to God. He wasn't even a Christian at the time. Isn't that wild? Somehow he just knew to do that. They give the next 10% to yourself. In other words, save and live off the rest. And it's been great advice throughout my whole life. But let me ask you this. If God were to give you financial advice, would you take it? Because he talks about it a ton in the Bible. I'll just give some examples. This could be a whole sermons, but it says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits, the first part of what you get, of all your crops. Then this is what's going to happen. Then your barn will be filled with overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. In other words, God's saying, make sure you put him first, and you give to him first, and great things will happen. He gives a lot of other things. One of the things he says this is, don't get in consumer debt. Because he said the borrower will be slave to the lender. And that's true. And anybody that's in consumer debt, you understand about that, that you are a servant to the person or the organization that you owe money to. Another thing, God gives us advice in investments. He says this in Ecclesiastes, divide your investments into many places, for you don't know what risks lie ahead. Don't ever put all your eggs in one basket in investments. It's a bad thing. But God has just time after time after time. Why does he give us financial advice? It's not for his sake. He doesn't need it, right? He owns everything. But it's for our sake. He knows that almost half of our waking life is going to be spent, trying to make money for things. So he gives us advice in that. We said also that God tells us some things, gives advice just to rich people. And we said this, we come to the end of a series that we've been doing for the last few weeks on how to be rich. And before this series, probably most of us, when we read something in the Bible that talked specifically to rich people, it never applied to us, right? At least that's what we believe, because we never thought we were rich. And then we started looking at statistics and realized most of us in this room, most of us who are hearing me online, are in between the 96th and 99th percentile of wage earners in the world. In other words, we are rich. And here's the verse. Let's look at the verse that we've been looking at again. First, let's look at the first part of it. Command those who are rich in this present world, now we know that's us, not to be arrogant or to put their hope in wealth. Here's the reason, for it's so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Now, he's about to command us to do 4 things. And understand, these are all things that we can do. The first thing is command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous, and to be willing to share. To be good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous and be willing to share. How can we become rich in good deeds and generosity? I think one of the biggest ways is just to keep our antennas up. Look for opportunities. Look for ways that we can make a difference in people's lives every day. Because I truly believe that every day of our life, God will give us opportunities to make a difference, to bless somebody. It could be somebody at school. It could be somebody at work. It could be just giving somebody some encouragement, doing a text, just some words of encouragement. It can be doing something to bless your parents, or to bless your spouse, or just anything. There's so many opportunities. If we look around, if we have our antennas up, God will give us opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And here's the thing you and I both know. We know that one person can say the right thing, or do something even simple for us, and it can make a difference in our whole day, can't it? It can make a difference in our whole week. It can redirect our life in some way. I remember one time I was on a mission trip with my mentor, Dr. Tuttle, and he was sitting over next to the window over here. I was sitting over here, but he was talking. I could hear him talking to our translator, and the translator said, "Who is the best student you ever had?" And I remember him saying, I could see that he pointed to me. And I don't know whether he just did that because he knew I was listening, probably the case, or what. You know what I mean? But just that word, I know what a difference it made in my life, and not a cockiness, but it was like a God confidence that came up just because hearing one person say something like that. This was right when I first started ministry, and man, I was wet behind the ears, and just to hear that, it changed my life. It gave me a God confidence that I did not have before. Just being a pastor can be stressful anytime. It is, doing a message every week and preparing for that and doing that and everything. And being over an organization, anybody that's that, the stress that is involved in that. Last week was a little more stressful than others because I not only the regular messages, but then we had the youth conference last week, which added stress. And I spoke at the youth conference, which added some stress. I spoke this Wednesday, which added some stress. So I preached 3 different messages, 4 different times in 5 different days, and it just seemed like more stress. And Sylvia and I, last week, I invited her to go out on a lunch date, just to have an oasis in the middle of this chaotic storm. And I remember somebody was there from the church, and when it came time to pay the bill, found out that person paid the bill. And it did many things. I mean, not only was that just a blessing like that, but it was also, if somebody does something nice to you, doesn't it do something to you? But also in this situation, because in the middle of that, it was just like God going, "Gotcha, bro," right? He may not said bro, but okay, but it just felt like God saying, "I got you, okay? It's gonna be fine. In the middle of the stress, I've got you." Sometimes even a small thing can make all the difference in the world. So have your antennas up for opportunities, but also pre-decide to give your money and your time to certain things. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians. Here's what he says. "Now, regarding your question about money being collected for God's people," this is it, "on the first day of each week, you should each put aside a portion of the money you have earned." He's telling them, pre-decide when you're going to do it. First day of the week, which was Sunday back then, still is, said pre-decide what you're going to give. Sylvia and I have already pre-decided every paycheck what we're going to give. We don't have to decide, hey, are we going to tithe this week? Are we going to tithe this month and things? It's something that has already been pre-decided. And this is, and what happens when we don't pre-decide something? When we don't pre-decide to give our time to God, if we don't pre-decide to give our resources to God and His work, what's going to happen? We give God leftovers, don't we? If we have anything at all. And I want you to think about leftovers, how nasty those things can be, right? You go in there and all of a sudden you got, it's a half-eaten pizza, thing, and it's just, but do you give leftovers to an honored guest that comes? Never, right? You would never go, this is either, 3-week-old chili or it's something with sauerkraut. I don't know which one it is here. You wouldn't do that. You give, leftovers are for who? Leftovers are for us. They're not for an honored guest. So we give our honored guest the best, right? And if we don't intentionally give to God those things, we know that He's just going to get left over by the end of the paycheck, by the end of the day, by the end of the week. Also, change from being a random giver and server into being a regular giver and server. Financial investors will tell you to do something called dollar cost averaging. And that means when you get paid, every time you get paid, put some money aside into an investment, and over time, it makes a big difference. Even when it's a down market, up market, just keep doing that. I remember reading about a cop that put $50 aside every paycheck for his children when the time that they were born, and by the time that they were in college, he had paid for their whole college. And the whole thing was just over time. It's the consistency of that. And likewise, the best way to be rich towards God is regularly and consistently invest predetermined whatever you do. In church, the reason, there are people who are haphazard givers here, and great, thank you, thank that. and haphazard servers. But the backbone of this church is the intentional, regular givers and the intentional, regular servers. Like today, you came in, and there were people that greeted you. There are people that were on stage. There were people that are doing the music and the lights and the sound and everything like that. There are people that are taking care of your babies and your children and your youth and all that. There's people that are getting you coffee, right? And those are people who have already pre-decided. Those are not people that just randomly come in and just say, I'll do something today. There's people who have pre-decided to do that. Now, they don't have to do that every single week. You'll see different, they're on a rotation, a lot of them. You'll see different greeters. You'll see different people up here leading worship, different people serving in different things. But if people did not pre-decide to regularly do that and to regularly give, what would happen around here? Not much, right? And I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt, this is not in my notes, but I felt like to say this. This is true in everything in life, that to do regular devotions, that is predetermined. I've already done that. I'll do that tonight. I've predetermined. I'm not going to give God a leftover that's maybe try to work him in. It's regular attenders that make the difference. You can randomly come and everything, great, but I'm telling you, you're missing out, and that's not God's intention to do that. God's telling us to regularly meet together as some, and not to not meet together as some are in the habit of doing. We can get in a regular habit of coming. We can get in a regular habit of not coming. And God's just saying, let's do things predetermined and already do that. Really, I remember somebody telling me one time that church starts Saturday night. And it really does. That sometimes if we're too exhausted, two things from that, we're not going to be ready for Sunday morning. There's also something, here's the problem with haphazard giving or serving. It never really gets in your heart. But if you consistently give, if you consistently come, if you can consistently serve, it starts getting in your heart. Now, we know this in other areas, don't we? If you haphazardly exercise, like every month or so, you do that. Every few weeks, maybe you'll just, you'll take a walk. Every few weeks, you'll go to the gym or something. The only thing you're going to get out of that is you're going to get sore, right? It's when you consistently do that. That's when it affects your muscles. That's when it affects your heart. In fact, if you only do things, you need to do three things 3 times a week in order just to maintain what you have right now. So if you just want to stay with the shape you are right now, do it 3 times a week. If you do less than that, you're going to lose stuff. If you do more than that, then you're going to gain. It's the consistency in that. And the same thing with is habitual ministry. Is when you start coming on a regular basis, it's going to get in your heart in a way that just haphazard coming is not. When you start serving in a non-haphazard way, in an intentional way, man, all of a sudden you may start in a ministry, but suddenly you start loving those people. You start caring about the kids. You start caring about the backpack buddies. You start caring about the people that are involved in things. All of a sudden your heart is there. You start praying for them. You start loving those kids. You start, whatever the ministry is, you start really loving to help lead worship and things like that. It's a consistency that makes all the difference. So God is saying how we become good at being rich, and whatever that is, we not randomly, but we regularly do something. And the Bible says this, in this way, okay? This verse, he's about to say what he just said, it hangs on that. And he's saying by doing those things, those 4 things, this is what's going to happen. In this way, you will lay up treasure for yourself as a firm foundation for the coming age. Don't miss that. God is saying there is a direct correlation between what we do with our stuff down here and what happens in eternity. Now, that's not saying you earn your way to heaven. That's only through faith in Jesus Christ. But what happens to us in eternity, what the blessings we could receive or don't receive, happen apparently by what we do or don't do with our talents, our treasures, our resources, and our testimony. So here's the thing, since there's a direct correlation there, what should we do? The first thing is view your wealth through the lens of eternity. If you do this, 2 things will happen. Number 1, you'll begin to lose the grip on money that you have. The first time I ever went to Brazil, the unit of currency was a cruzeiro. okay? Just like we have the dollar. England has a pound, things like that. So it was a crucero, and man, the exchange rate was like crazy high for us, okay? It was like crazy high. I remember I took $70 spending money, and I was a multimillionaire, baby. It felt good, but it was kind of weird going to McDonald's and seeing $32,000 something for a hamburger. But here's the thing: the rate was 40%, not only for a year inflation rate. That was per month. Okay, 40% a month. That meant in 2.5 months, if I came back in 6 months or a year to Brazil, that money would be worth absolutely nothing. It would not be worth the paper that it was printed on. And in the same way, think about this, the currency that we have, it's going to be available for us, 60, 70, 80, 90, maybe 100 years, maybe 110 years. But then after that, you guys, it's going to be, that currency is going to be absolutely worthless. It's like the people who went to see the rich man's funeral. And one person said, how much did he leave behind? And one wise person said, all of it. And that's what happens, right? That's why Jesus said this. What we do with our stuff on this mission trip called life, it makes a big difference. Jesus told us this: provide purses for yourself that won't wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And notice the terminology that both Jesus uses and Paul uses. It never mentions guilt, right? Because that's not the way to be good at being rich. I don't know anybody that's good at being rich that does so, well, why did you do that? I just felt so guilty. No, it's because people that are good at being rich, they'll say something like this. They'll say, I realize that God has given me all this stuff to be a steward of that. And when I do that, it blesses other people. It blesses God. It blesses me. Everybody wins. That's why we do that. And money also will begin to lose its grip on you. Jesus said this. He said, you cannot serve both God and money. And notice here he did not say you can't serve both God and the devil. Now, obviously that's true, but that's not what he said here. He didn't say you can't serve both God and idols, because we can't, but that's not what he said here. He said that the one thing that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to try to grab our heart is the biggest thing that there's going to be a fight with is money. There's a story here. In the book where the red fern grows, the main character, Billy, wants to train his dogs to hunt raccoons. In order to do this, he first has to catch a raccoon so that his dogs learn the scent. Billy seeks advice from his grandpa, who was once a skilled raccoon hunter. Grandpa instructs Billy to drop a piece of shiny tin inside a hole in a log in the woods. He tells Billy to hammer in nails around the hole in the log at opposite slants to one another. Grandpa tells Billy that the raccoons, being a curious animal, will try to get the piece of tin out at the bottom of the log, but when he tries to pull out the fisted paw, it'll catch on the nails. Billy protested that all the raccoon has to do to escape the trap is just open up its fist and slip through. But Grandpa insists that a raccoon will never release its grip on something bright and shiny. Once Billy's scent disappeared from the trap, sure enough, he caught a raccoon. And don't we do the same thing? That God knows this, that he wants us free from the control of money in our life. And he knows the freedom and the joy it brings when we do this. I mean, when we do this, it just brings us, a miser is miserable. There's a reason why there's that word, right? And the same thing, releasing brings a joy. Now, we're about to read a parable that Jesus told, okay? And it starts out, and it's really in the context of how to be rich. And here's something too. It starts out with somebody telling Jesus what to do. That's not smart, is it? I mean, he's telling Jesus what to do. I'm glad you and I have never, ever, ever tried to do something like that, right? We've never given God advice. We've never said, hey, God, you should do it this way. We've never done that. But here it is. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus responds by giving this person and the listening things and us this warning. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. Now that's exactly the opposite of what the world would say, right? The world says that whoever dies with the most toys wins. But Jesus is saying life is not about just what we have. It's about something else. And one of those is telling the truth, and one of those is a lie. Which one do you think is telling the truth? Then he said this, and he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. I mean, this is a rich person problem, right? He has too much and has to figure out a place to put the rest of his stuff. And the people that are listening here, most of them are probably going, yeah, it must be rough. Then he said this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grains and my goods. We understand this because we do the same thing, don't we? We put in additional shelvings. We do an outbuilding. Sometimes we will rent a storage unit and things. That's a first world problem, right? A third world people do not have to worry about getting a storage unit. First, they couldn't afford it, and second of all, they don't have anything to put in there. This is a problem that we have. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take easy, eat, drink, and be merry. I'm golden. Man, I got things for me for a long time. And here's the thing. Don't miss this. His strategy is brilliant if there was nothing else to this life except this life. But there's something else, isn't there? And so it says this, but God. And anytime you see but God, you realize that God has just laid down a trump card, right? And here's what happens. We can have all of our plans, but God is the one who has the final say in everything. But God says to him, don't miss this, you fool. Whoa. Now, why is he a fool? Is he a fool because he has a bunch of stuff? No, God is the one who blessed him with all that stuff. He's a fool because he's not good at being rich. He's a fool because his whole interest is in this world, nothing else in the world to come. And he says, this very night, your life will be demanded from you. There are things we have control over in this world, and there's some things we have no control over whatsoever, right? And one of the biggest things we have no control over, no matter how much money we have, no matter how much power we have, anything, is when God says, out of the pool, your time has come. And God says not only that his time had run out, but he gives him a rhetorical question. He says this, then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? It's a rhetorical question because you know the answer to this. I know the answer to this, right? The answer to this is somebody else. It's always the answer. We always will leave something, somebody else will get it. Not because we're generous, but because we're gone. This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich towards God. Jesus is saying there's a way to be rich towards people. God, and there's a way to be poor towards God. And think of this. His life was a total loss. Because of this, all he had is he invested in this world. He had no investment at all in the world to come. And John Wesley, there's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with having money. There's nothing wrong with investing money. There's nothing wrong with passing money on to future generations. In fact, I love what John Wesley said. He said, make all you can. Save all you can. And then the third thing is give all you can. And here's the weird thing. Don't miss this. Hear this if you hear nothing else. Everything we try to hold on to in this world, we're going to lose. Everything we give to God, we will eventually gain. And the Bible says, and have you ever thought of this? Jesus doesn't need our stuff. He doesn't need your stuff. So why is this important to him? Because again, wherever our treasure is, there our heart's going to be also. It's an indication of where our heart is. And Jesus wants our heart. You know one thing I love? I love hearing parents, moms and dads give me testimonies about some cool things that their children did. It could be a little kid, it could be their youth, but they're saying, hey, my kid did this very selfless act. My kid gave this. I just saw him do this, and there's excitement in their voice. And why does a mom and dad get so excited when they see their child do that? Because they realize their child is acting like God there, because he's incredibly generous. He's incredibly giving. He's incredibly, and they're going, my son, my daughter gets what life is about. And I think God does the same thing when we are selfless, when we do something nice for somebody, when we give something, when we're generous in that way. God's saying, you've got my heart. And it blesses the heart of God as he sees his children do that. Now we're gonna show a testimony here in a second. Last week I talked about service, and there are so many people that I could have said are the poster children in this church for serving. This is one, and there's also for giving, and this is one of the people. This is a young man that I really started hanging out with when he was 16 years old. And I've never seen generosity like this guy. This kid knew what he realized and he talked about. I've just been given these things. I'm a steward. I'm not an owner of this. I would watch a 16-year-old kid give 100% tip to a waiter. Talk about opening a door to talk about Jesus. I'd watch him when his friend, when he was in his early 20s, when his friend, and it was his single mom raising him, and they couldn't pay enough money for rent. So he paid for their rent for several months. What 20-year-old kid does something like this? This is the best guy I know, probably, at least a young man, of being good at being rich. And here's his story.
Hey, how's everybody doing? My name's Michael. I've been a member here for a long time, and I just wanted to share with you guys how generosity has really affected my life in so many ways, and why it is so important to live with an open hand, because it was never yours in the first place. I would say the most impactful story in my life, personally, where I saw God reciprocate that generosity was I was working a job a few years ago, and I was trying to purchase my first house. And I had got the keys to the house right at the beginning of the COVID epidemic. And it was a crazy story because the day I got the keys to the house, my job did a mandatory test on everybody. And I tested positive, which meant I had to go out of work fully paid, but I had no symptoms. And after 2 weeks, I tested positive again. Mind you, this whole time, I'm remodeling my own house and getting paid by my job to do it. And that went on for almost 4 months of that happening, and they would not let me go back to work. No matter how much I tried, they would not let me go back because I was testing positive with no negative symptoms. And I just wanted to say that I feel like that's God's economy. And the way it reciprocates in your life is different. It may not be what you anticipate or where you anticipate it to come into your life, but it will. I've just always believed you live with an open hand because it wasn't yours, you know? And here, I'll give you an example. Let's see, find a bill, something here. If you use this as an example, right? Like, we all see this and we think that this was earned by us. But the reality is, this wasn't earned by us. This was given to us to be a good steward over. And the better of a steward you are, the more he gives you opportunity to impact people, to serve people, and to love on people. And we all say, oh, I make this an hour, or whatever it would be. But the reality is we don't. God gives you the breath, the cognizance, and the health to be able to do everything and earn everything that you have come in your life. So it's not you, it's him providing through your efforts. So there's a very interesting phenomenon. What I believe is God had set this in the foundations of the earth as a principle in the world, and it's generosity reciprocates in so many ways. And statistically, you can see it across the board. People who give, on average, receive 1.6 times that over the future years, no matter of the circumstance, because generosity is a principle that God set in place, and you don't give for that purpose. It's just a side effect.
Amen. I want to go back to and close with the words he closed with. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. I'm not sure what that means, but I want it. I want that. I want that for my life. I want that for Sylvia's life. I want that for my children. I want that for my grandchildren, and I want that for you. What kind of a pastor would I be if I knew this principle and I did not share this with you? And this is the thing that is amazing to me too. Paul, in this section, he never mentions the blessing that it's going to make in other people's lives, the difference it's going to make there. He doesn't talk about the joy that we get for giving. I mean, it is more blessed to give than receive. There's something about when we see that and you see it making a difference in lives, it's just that joy. It doesn't talk about just how much that strengthens our faith, right? And it doesn't talk about either about that we're going to receive a bunch just like he talked about this side of heaven. That's not why we give. But that's going to be a result because it is a principle. So if it was just for this world, it would be smart to be good at being rich. But it's also not only for an investment in this world, but everything we let go of for the kingdom of God, we make a difference also. We're laying up treasure, it says, in heaven. So what is God telling you? What is God telling you to be better at being rich?